So let's talk about AI first companies. What are they? Why should you become one? And how do you get there? So to understand an AI first company, let's contrast it with a traditional company. So a traditional organization puts people at the center. They are the engine that drives the company forward. And you're limited by the number of hours, the number of people that you have working for you. In an AI first company, you are now putting AI at the core of your business. You're making AI the engine. Now that doesn't mean you're replacing people with AI. What it means is you're using AI, you're harnessing it as the engine, and now you're using the people to wrap around that engine to steer the company and take you to places you've never been before. What it fundamentally lets you do is move from an era of scarcity where, as a manager, you are leading by managing resources. You're limited on headcount. You're limited on the number of hours there are in the day. You're limited by the amount of capital you have, the other resources you have at your disposal. So you're managing through scarcity. Instead, you're now able to think about abundance. How do you create abundance? How do you ride down cost curves? How do you take time out of the equation and use AI as the engine of your company to 10x or 100x your impact? That is the difference that we're talking about here. And what it means is you're also measured in different ways. Your revenue historically is tied fundamentally to the number of hours that people work. How many people do you have? How many hours they work? How productive are they? Multiply that together, and that's going to be the impact you have and the revenue that you create. In an AI first company, now you can start to be measured on the outcomes you create for the world. What is the impact that you're having? And you get rewarded fundamentally on impact and outcomes, not on hours worked. Now, what's the playbook? How do you become an AI first company? Well, here's some ways to think about it. First thing you're trying to do is amplify the people you have. Not replace them, amplify them, increase the impact they have. So here are a couple of questions to ferment your thinking in this area. Firstly, if AI removed all busy work tomorrow, what would your people finally create? How can you unleash your people to do something extraordinary? Secondly, if your best employee could be everywhere at once, what would you build? AI allows you to do that, to amplify the people you have, to amplify the impact that they have, 10x or 100x. So by pairing people, partnering them with AI, how can you amplify the people you have in your organization? Again, not replace them, amplify them. Secondly, how do you collapse constraints? Constraints like cost, constraints like time, fundamental barriers in the business world. So a couple of questions for you, again, for you to ferment your thinking. If execution took days instead of years, what would you finally pursue? Something you've always dreamed of, but never been able to think of, actually making it happen. And secondly, if your marginal cost fell towards zero, what becomes possible? What could you do that you could never do before, because suddenly you're riding a cost curve that lets you deliver something or a service and value and experience that you could never deliver before? The third step of this, once you've ridden down that cost curve, you've amplified your people, how do you fundamentally reinvent the game? Play a different game than your competition. So here, 2 more questions to ferment your thinking. If your teams gain superpowers and constraints disappear, what becomes possible for you? What could you entertain you'd never done before? What game could you play differently? And if you started fresh with AI today, if you were a startup competitor who was trying to eat your lunch, how would you go about building a new company to compete with you? So would you build it differently than you've built your company today? That's the way to think about how you're going to compete in the coming years. So to summarize it, how do you amplify your people? How do you collapse constraints using AI? And then once you've done that, how do you reinvent the game entirely? Marshall McLuhan, philosopher and professor at University of Toronto, he's famous for, by the way, saying that media is the message. He also said, we march backwards into the future. Sometimes we're always looking backwards at the way we've done things in the past, and it makes it hard to actually go into the future. So how do you march forwards into the future without looking back? It means you need to let go of a lot of the way things were done in the past. So it requires AI first leadership. It requires leaders to think about things in a different way so they can lead their teams forward into this brave new world we're talking about of being an AI first organization. What it means is managers and leaders need to move from managing headcount to now focusing their time on designing superhuman teams. They become orchestrators, conducting an orchestra, which is now a blend of human employees, machine employees, digital employees in the form of AI agents, and if you have a physical component to your work, robots. And successfully managing and blending all those constituents and building powerful teams that elevate the humans to superhuman levels is now the core leadership and management challenge when it comes to people. Secondly, how do you move from managing budgets and timelines in that world of constraint and scarcity to now unlocking abundance? How do you use AI to knock down the barriers and to make sure that your people are now working in a world of abundance so they can deliver more for the world? And finally, how do you shift from thinking about defending today's business to free up your time so you can start thinking about what you're going to invent and what businesses you're going to build for tomorrow beyond the business that you have today? These are some of the opportunities that are unlocked when you become an AI first company.